Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, a massive attack on a Syrian base claims multiple Iranian casualties. 3 Gazans are killed by IDF troops in multiple border breaches. And we've got the scoop on an award-winning Israeli series that shows a very different side of Haredi life in the Holy Land. We've just learned of a massive missile attack on a Syrian military base in the country's central region. Reports on this vary, but it's believed that 26 fighters for the Assad regime have been killed in the blast, the majority of whom are said to be Iranians. Now, Syria's government-operated media has blamed a joint British-American operation for the blast, but most seem to agree that Israel is more likely behind the strike. In what could be related news, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will now hold an emergency televised announcement this evening. His speech will include a significant update on Iran's nuclear aspirations. This base is a central site for both Syria and Iran, and given the high volume of Iranian weapons believed to be stockpiled there, Israel is indeed a more likely candidate than the United States. This attack also comes on the heels of Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman's promise that the IDF would do anything and everything to keep Iran out of Syria. Still, the army, as per policy, has neither confirmed nor denied any direct involvement. The situation in Syria has been headed towards disaster for quite some time now. Most recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin has reportedly all but agreed to deliver a payload of deadly S-300 missiles to the Syrian army, weapons that in the end would likely be used against Israeli forces. Russia has warned Israel of grave consequences if it should interfere in such a handoff, but given the brewing threat of a Russian-Iranian-Syrian alliance on its doorstep, Israel would likely be left with no alternative. Meanwhile, United States President Donald Trump has pledged to pull out all remaining American forces in Syria. This, coupled with the possible fallout should America pull out of the Iranian nuclear deal, means Israel is likely bracing for impact. Joining me now in the studio with more on this latest development in Syria is former head of the Israeli Air Force Intelligence and chairman of HaShomer Chadash, Brigadier General Ram Shmueli. Thank you so much for coming back in.
Hi, Aaron.
So my first thing, do you think it's safe to assume that Israel is behind this latest attack?
I can't approve or disapprove. I want to say that this is a very tense situation, what's happening now. And the situation that the Iranians are pumping a lot of weapons in the last couple of weeks. Although you could assume that they will hesitate a little bit because there is a pressure from the US and Israel, not at all. The smuggling of weapons to Syria is getting faster and more devastating. And what's happened last night, the attack on this base, this is part of the way to avoid this build-up of Iranian in Syria. So although I can't approve or disapprove, but I have been in those situations, both in the air, I've been in a couple of attacks in my life, and I've been in the situation in the headquarters of taking those capabilities and attacks in Syria. So I can say that this attack last night is a very tense situation. I think that I can give an advice to our government and say that we have to be very, very cautious and serious about the threat from Iran that they are going to retaliate, although I don't think that they are going to do it up to the 12th of May because they now have other interests with the nuclear deal. But after the nuclear deal, this is something that can be happened, the retaliation of Iran.
You're expecting a physical military retaliation into Israel sovereignty, like into Israel proper?
I take the Iranian very seriously. They are very serious people. I don't advise them to do that. But I think that we have to be ready and very cautious about it on one hand, but not give up on our red lines of preventing any kind of strategic weapons that are coming from Iran to Syria. But another advice that I can give ourselves is to be modest, not get out with many declarations, just to keep on doing what we have to do, and I don't approve that we have done it last night, but we have to keep on protecting our interest in Syria, because Syria become the battleground of the superpowers. Some of the fighting in Syria, this is not our battleground.
It's a proxy
we
war
have to
for
prevent.
major...
Yes, we have to prevent attacks on Israel. We have to prevent smuggling of weapons. But this is a battleground of superpower. So be modest and ready for any retaliation.
So, okay, so that kind of feeds into my other question is, you know, you have Defense Minister Lieberman saying, you know, we have these red lines. We're not going to let Iran keep funneling these weapons to Hezbollah, to, you know, Assad, to whomever. Do you think that this latest attack, assuming Israel did it, was in coordination with American or, you know, other Western forces or even Russian forces, or was it just kind of unilateral? They said, you know, you guys are taking too long. We're just going to go in and do it.
The only thing that I can say is that in the past we haven't witnessed a visit of high person from America in Israel, and in the same night there was an attack. So this is an exception. What happened last night? We have the foreign affairs minister Pompeo in Israel, and there was attack at night. So if this is a sign, so maybe there is a sign of cooperation, because in the past we haven't attacked in days that there was a very high position visit in Israel the same night. Do you see,
you know, kind of moving back to Russian involvement, do you see Russia physically getting involved, like with boots on the ground? You know, like who, should there be a war in Syria that involves Israel, who else is going to have skin in the game?
The Russians, I think that they don't have any problem in Syria, because the Americans are not boots on the ground and are not going to do it in the future. The Iranians are promoting some of their interests, but they are making some headaches for the Russians on the other hand. So I think that the Russians have, the interest of the Russians is the ports that they have in Tartus and Latakia, the influence in the region. Unfortunately for us, the Americans are not influential anymore in the region. So for the Russians, they are all set. Maybe something will change in the future, but as for us, we have to be in coordination with the Russians on one hand, but not give up of our interest to protect our country.
All right, Brigadier General, thank you very much for coming back in and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
All right, now freshly sworn in head of state Mike Pompeo has just met with Prime Minister Netanyahu here in Israel for just one leg of a whirlwind Middle East trip. But with a deadline less than 2 weeks away to either renew the JCPOA nuclear deal with Iran or walk away from it altogether, the two leaders had a lot to discuss in preparation for either of those scenarios. Netanyahu will actually make a televised speech in a few hours from now to update the Israeli public on significant developments in Iran's nuclear program.
Regarding the JCPOA, President Trump's been pretty clear. This deal is very flawed. He's directed the administration to try and fix it. And if we can't fix it, he's going to withdraw from the deal. It's pretty straightforward.
All eyes are on President Trump as this deadline approaches. Though Pompeo and Netanyahu share Trump's criticisms of the deal, leaders around the world see it as the only viable way to slow Iran's quest for nuclear weapons. Trump infamously campaigned on his promise to either fix or nix the deal. French President Macron actually visited the White House to try and convince Trump that the deal had merits, but came away believing that the American president would likely withdraw from it, mostly to appease his voter base anyway. Regardless, the house of cards that is the Middle East is a very fragile thing. Pulling the plug on the deal now would likely kick off a domino effect that would not be undone. For this reason, Iran would presumably refuse any renegotiations. Many believe that if the deal indeed collapses, Iran will simply pick up where it left off before the deal and resume amassing the stockpile needed to develop nukes.
In case Iran breaks out for nuclear weapons and quits the NPT and expels the IAEA inspectors from Iran, that would mean that Iran is not just after resuming its nuclear activity, but it's after a bomb. And then I think we could expect Israel to take more radical actions, including military options, against Iran, because Israel has always made it very clear that it will not allow Iran to become a nuclear military state.
After meeting with Pompeo, Netanyahu received a phone call from Trump to discuss the potential hurdles on the horizon as well, and some wonder if the talk was more of a heads-up to say that a big change is on the way. Demonstrations on the Gaza security barrier are continuing on, and late yesterday the army responded to 3 separate security breaches along the Gaza border. In each case, Palestinian suspects attempted to overrun the border fence, sometimes hurling explosive devices at IDF personnel in the process. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with more on this. Now, Brett, Can you tell us exactly what happened?
So the IDF is confirmed multiple attempts to either breach or destroy the Gaza security barrier. Sometimes those incidents occurred right on top of each other. This was obviously a very, very frantic evening. I understand that in 2 cases, a small group of Palestinians from Gaza made their way to the fence, attempting to enter Israeli territory. The Army's actually just released some drone footage that I think we have now. Supposedly this was taken while those incidents actually occurred, if you want to, yeah. So in a 3rd instance, Palestinians were actually able to breach the fence. Once they got to the other side, they quickly unloaded IEDs at nearby Israeli troops, prompting a live fire response. And at this time, 3 Palestinians have been killed. Several others have been arrested as well.
I mean, yeah, things have obviously been ramping up lately throughout these quote-unquote March of Return protests that Hamas has backed. And Hamas has backed these protests and they contend that they're nonviolent, but Israel cites incidents like this one that we just saw, countless others like it, like fire bombings and tire burnings, rock throwings, etc., as evidence that it's merely a cover for terrorism. So still, it's pretty unusual to see so much activity on a weekday. Right. Typically, we see stuff like this when, the big crowds gather on the weekend protests.
No,
right?
Sure. I mean, I personally have a feeling that there's a lot more going on during the week than either Israeli or Hamas spokespeople are actually sharing. Now, this case is obviously more extreme considering there's, multiple casualties involved. Sure. This also comes at a time when Israel has been fiercely criticized for its use of live fire throughout these demonstrations. Israel clearly believes that it's acting within the law in order to secure its borders, but with the death toll nearing 40 now since these protests began, which includes, 2 Palestinian journalists and 2 teenagers among the dead, world leaders and the UN are deeply concerned that this is, maybe excessive force.
Well, these are all arguments that we've heard before.
Sure.
One thing that the Army points out in the footage that they've released of the attempted infiltrations is that Hamas is clearly orchestrating the crowds to conceal its true intent. Right. In some of the footage, you can even see how the smoke from the tire fires form kind of like a cone or like an alleyway, a little area that they can slip in without being noticed, and that gives protesters cover as they approach the fence. Right. So, and then they try to sneak in, and at any rate, it's very dangerous, it's very complicated, and these accusations say a lot, but we'll have to see what happens next. All right, thank you, Brett.
Sure.
Now, Iceland's Jewish community only consists of about 200 people, and the country only just recently received its first actual rabbi. Still, Iceland's parliament has inched closer and closer to greenlighting a full ban on all circumcisions from the country, a decision that would set a dangerous precedent for the rest of Europe. Well, now it looks like that ban will not be moving forward, at least not for now. Though the controversial proposal had been gaining steam among Icelandic lawmakers recently, the top parliament committee has just advised shelving the plan for the time being. The parliament is set to go on recess shortly, meaning a vote is unlikely to happen before that time. Regardless, proponents of the bill hope the issue will be brought to the table again after recess is over. Legislators in Iceland argue that the circumcision of male infants is both cruel and dangerous, citing numerical medical studies which say the risks of circumcisions don't always outweigh the benefits. Iceland's Jewish committee, which is mostly Reform or non-practicing Jews, have found the idea of the ban troubling. But truth be told, many of them have personally admitted to feeling uncomfortable about circumcising their babies to begin with. The country's brand new rabbi, 27-year-old Rabbi Feldman, originally from New York, says the ban doesn't seem to come from a place of anti-Semitism, but rather ignorance. Still, Jewish groups around the world have lobbied against the proposal in Iceland, arguing it would lay a legal basis for other countries to exploit the ban for future Jewish persecution. Indeed, if Iceland were to legalize the ban, it would be the first country in the EU to do so. For now, Jewish communities worldwide are breathing a sigh of relief and hoping the idea is soon struck down permanently. Though the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is often on the tips of everyone's tongues here in the Middle East, it's not often that you hear truly new, original, and peaceful discourse. Well, starting last week, a new series of events is seeking to change that, and here with more is Yamit Eriksson, the co-founder and external relations head for Have You Seen the Horizon Lately? So thank you very much for coming in, Yamit.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about Have You Seen the Horizon?
Well, basically, it's a set of 15 events in 8 different cities across Israel. Last week, we had our opening event in Tel Aviv, and we had over 2,200 people buying tickets to hear new perspective and approaches on how the conflict is solvable. We had speakers like Professor Dan Ariely, Professor Ann Halperin. We had Ro'i Ravitsky, who leads an amazing initiative that actually brings together religious figures, rabbis from settlements, and sheikhs and imams supporting Hamas from Gaza. And they meet under the radar to find a solution on how to move forward from their own special place.
And then does that, I mean, do these actions, have they translated into, you know, kind of real objective measurements that we can kind of see in the real peace process?
Well, basically, it's about stimulating a new conversation, about recreating hope that this could be solved one day. And also, this entire project is also, we have a research that's being done around it in order to see if we could actually, you know, make people go through this capsule experience and if they come out hopeful. It's about, you know, fighting the psychological barriers that most Israelis, you know, live on their daily routines. And it was outstanding. I mean, to see new faces and young people who find interest and to see how they walked in and how they walked out, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, what's like, you know, is it like night and day, or is it just kind of, oh, you know, I inched a little bit further from that point of view, or, you know, what?
Well, it depends, because a lot of people came with no expectations, and there were a lot of people who were very pessimistic, and to see them and their reactions, it was unbelievable. You could definitely see that we touched something.
So, well, so what kind of, you know, can you give me like an example of a solution that was maybe brought forward, other than, you know, initiatives to maybe bring people together?
But basically those initiatives are bringing people together and opening this conversation for other constituencies, and not having this traditional, you know, peace camp of being, you know, conducted from a secular group in Kikar Rabin, and to move it outside and to open it. We brought people that took part in ending the conflict in Northern Ireland, and people from Vietnam, who actually tell us how this could be reached one day, and that our conflict, though it is very unique, it's not something unusual, and showing us that this could be done one day. But the amazing thing is that what I found is not painting it in rosy colors.
Sure. It's like it takes like a real kind of perspective and says, listen, these are very real issues. Let's get down and kind of deal with them.
And it's not easy, and maybe we will not see the fruits ourselves, but, you know, the generations to follow.
Starting on that
exactly. And that's the horizon we want to offer. Well,
Yamit, it sounds amazing. And if anybody is interested in going to check it out, go to israel.co.il.
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 And we have more events this week, so join us.
Check it out. All right, Yamit Erickson, thank you so much for coming in. We've all known the students who just skirt by in school thinking you can just cut and paste a little here, paraphrase there, and bam, you've got yourself an essay. Well, not anymore. Israeli plug-in Originality is now debuting across multiple campuses, checking and finding plagiarism with record speed and accuracy. Here with more is Originality founder Idan Frost. Thank you for coming in.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, okay, you know, Originality looks for plagiarism. How does it find it?
We have a very large database that connects to all of our universities and colleges that already works with us. And once a student submits a job to that particular task, the job gets to our servers, and then he gets compared to all of our database. Our database right now consists of almost 200,000 jobs that we have from 3 different universities that already are working with us, and almost 15 colleges in Israel.
So, okay, so these kind of, you create a big database of all these different documents, and then it basically just scans the text and it says you have X amount of similarity with this text and that text. And you know, how specific does it get?
It gets really specific. If you do copy-paste, it's very easy to find.
Sure.
But
if let's say, you know, I skip every other word or something.
Okay, so I will get it, and you can try me. Okay, I will find.
This sounds like a challenge.
It is. Yeah, it took 10 years to build it. So
okay, so let's go back a decade here. You know, what inspired you to build this program? How did you get into that?
Actually, I was a student when I did it, and it was my practicum,
finals.
Yeah, my finals for the BA. And one of my professors told me that this was his dream, and he's waiting for someone to do it because he don't know how to do it. And I took the challenge, and after 2 months, I created the proof of concept. And that's it. And from then, it's history.
All right, so, okay, so it's already in use in how many universities and colleges? You said 15
right. Yeah, colleges. Yeah, and 3 universities.
And 3 universities here in Israel.
Yeah.
And it works, you said, I think you told me earlier, you know, it works on Moodle and what other?
Yeah, there are 63 colleges and universities in Israel. 17 of them use Yedion, and the all others use the open source Moodle software. So we built a plugin that can be easily installed in both of them. It's very easy to install. It takes less than 5 minutes.
Wow. All right. Well, I mean, I'm sure that the results have been spectacular so far. The word is spreading, I'm assuming.
Yeah. It's only for the past 3 years, because it took us a long time to get our first customer. But after our first customer, it was very easy to go to more customers and get more customers.
All right. Well, I hope nothing but the best for you. This is a very cool program.
Thank you very
Dan
much.
Foss, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, now have you ever heard of the Edison Awards? Named for famous inventor Thomas Edison, the awards spotlight the world's most cutting-edge and innovative companies across a number of fields. Well, by now it probably goes without saying that Israeli firms dominated the awards this year, snagging 4 gold and 3 bronze medals. Not too shabby. At the awards ceremony in New York City, Israel-based companies had quite a magical night. The Herzliya-based company Solar Edge got the gold for a tech that boosts solar power conversion. Israeli Medical Technologies also snagged 2 first-place prizes, one for creating the world's first focused ultrasound device to treat essential tumors, and the other for a new women's menstrual pain relief device that doesn't require any pain medications. The 4th gold went to Ra'anana-based cybersecurity startup Secdo. That company actually sold for a whopping $100 million to Palo Alto Networks not too long ago. 2 other bronze awards went to Israeli firms Anagog and Innoviz Technologies for their work in artificial intelligence and autonomous driving technology. Last but not least, a company called Novocure grabbed a bronze for an innovative wearable device that treats a specific type of brain cancer. If Thomas Edison were alive today, I'm sure he'd be very impressed to see the Israeli innovations. It's safe to say Israelis know what's up when it comes to creating, writing, directing, and of course promoting Israeli written TV shows. And the new comedy drama from the Israeli TV network Hot has been added to that success list. ILTV's Manuel Kadosh has the scoop.
Thanks, Aaron. The hit TV show Shababnikim, or translated to English as The New Black, focuses on young, trendy yeshiva students figuring out who they are and what they dream of becoming. It's a classic group comedy that gives more of an insider look at the lives of those young yeshiva men roaming the streets of the holy city, represented in the show as the bad boys of the yeshiva world.
All right, so it sounds good. I mean, I haven't watched the show myself, but just by the trailer, you know, you can tell that a lot of people, yeshiva students, Jerusalemites, and Jews all over the world, and you know, non-Jews, non-Jerusalemites, etc., can relate to this show and the characters on at least some level.
Definitely, Aaron. The show has touched Israeli and Jews across the nation. Other than sweeping TV ratings, the show received 8 award nominations at the recent Israeli Academy of Film and Television Awards, as well as won 4 awards. It's basically an intersection of religious life and modern urban life. From what I heard, it's an amazing and very relatable show, not just for those more religious.
All right, well, yeah, I mean, from what it sounds like, the awards are well-deserved, but I did also hear that the show is only shown in Hebrew, is that correct?
Right. As of now, the show was available only in Hebrew until recently. It's been reported that the Times of Israel Presents will screen episode 1 and 2 with English subtitles at the Jerusalem Cinematheque tonight.
All right, well, this show definitely sounds like it's just beginning a long and successful career, as many TV shows from Israel before it, so I will definitely be checking this show out. Thanks for joining us, Manuel.
Thank you.
All right, now it's time for our Hebrew word of the day. With all the different kinds of Israeli innovations going on, sometimes it's hard to tell fact from fiction, and that's why today's word is mitziut, which means reality. Sometimes it sucks, sometimes it's great, but as far as we know, at the end of the day, we only have one actual physical mitziut, or reality. Is there another mitziut, or even many mitziuyot, or realities beyond that? Well, no one really knows for sure, but I'm sure in some version of mitziut, we do. As for augmented and virtual mitziut, well, some say a virtual mitziut can be just as good as the real one, but if you ask me, I prefer this mitziut, because hey, it ain't always pretty, but it does have 40 flavors of Ben & Jerry's. And with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight you can expect clear to partly cloudy skies and a low of about 73 or 23 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow will be partly cloudy with a slight rise in temperatures to a high of around 90 or 32 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.6 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for watching.